Hi, Wesley. Welcome to VC Talk. It's my great pleasure having you again.
Thanks, Max. How you doing? Good to see you again.
Good, good. Thanks for coming very much. Thank you. Now, as we've been speaking before talking, VC Talk is made for VC, of course, explaining the the thinking behind the venture capital ecosystem, how venture capital is built up, and to know for the startup, for the founders, how to better approach and better understanding the the VC industry. So thank you very much for coming, and
Sure.
I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
No,
Thank you for having me.
my pleasure. I would like to start with you asking in which area in geography you prefer to invest.
So I prefer companies that are based in the U.S. and typically we look for companies. We're not necessarily focused on which part of the country. I really believe that there are good companies, good founders, good solid concepts can come out of any part of the country. Typically, Boston and New York, and of course Silicon Valley, and LA, and areas on the West Coast, and typically Chicago and Austin and all those cities get a lot of attention from the VC community. But I really do believe that great ideas can come from Nebraska, Iowa, Utah, right? Certainly Atlanta, places that aren't necessarily the focus of the VC community, but places that can certainly spur great ideas nonetheless.
Sure. I mean, for example, many VC they say proximity matters. This is why founders they really like to know if can approach you, even though they are not exactly so proxy to where you are.
Sure. So I don't disagree with that necessarily. Obviously, technology has made the world smaller, right? You can certainly connect with someone over a Zoom call or a Google Meet or something like that. Um, that has kind of become the way of the world. But at the end of the day, there is no substitute, and I do believe this. It's no substitute for being able to go and shake someone's hand and look them in the eye and talk to them about their idea, right? Because the one thing that you cannot glean over social media, I mean, over a Zoom call, is is passion and commitment. I mean, kind of, sort of, but it's different when you're in front of someone and you're face to face.
I do agree. How much do you normally invest?
It depends, right? We play in the pre-seed and seed rounds, so anywhere from 100,000 up to probably 500,000 is about the most at this point. Um, but again, obviously, it depends on how strong the idea is, whether we are pre-revenue or post-revenue, those sorts of things. So obviously, there are some additional factors in there, but anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000.
Thank you. I mean, what are the top concern and where do you find the conviction when investing? The company, the team, the product, for example?
So all of those are actually top concerns, right? You absolutely want to make sure that you have a solid team, you have a solid, you're solving a solid problem, those sorts of things. But people talk about the four P's, but I'll tell you the fifth P that oftentimes gets left out really is passion, right? You can have people and you can have product, and you can have problem and all those kinds of things. And we can talk about performance and those kinds of things. But that fifth P is passion. And a lot of times, especially in the VC space, people can find a problem to solve, but they're not exactly passionate about their solution. And what I'm really looking for is, obviously we want a solid management team and people who have experience in the space and those kinds of things. But really what we're looking for is passion, right? Stick to itiveness. What we know is in the VC space or in the entrepreneurial space, it's not always roses. right? Sometimes there's going to be some thorns in there. And it's that passion that allows you to stick to it when your heart is hit. And that's what we're looking for.
I mean, how important is face to face when it comes to investments? Is not being geography close to the founder limitation? And may I ask, how often do you like to meet the founders pre-investment and also after invested?
I think normally pre-investment, there are normally, 2 or 3 phone calls, and if it's possible, a face-to-face. Post-investment, normally we're going to get together once a quarter at least, if not maybe twice a quarter. And those are just phone calls. Those aren't necessarily face-to-face. Face-to-face, we're going to try at least once a quarter to get together. Because again, you just want to be able to feel the energy, right? Feel the vibe, feel the passion, get a real feel for what's going on. And sometimes I can't do that from my office, right? The team can't do that from the office. We have to absolutely get in front of that founder, and we have to absolutely say, listen, tell us what's going on. Let's see the environment. Sometimes, some issues are easily solved with just changing, just making simple shifts in an environment. And sometimes founders are so close to whatever it is that, their solution is, whatever their product is, that the simple things, you just don't see it. And someone from the outside can come in and see that very quickly, make a few changes, and produce a winning result.
I do believe environment is so important. You very much understand when you walk into the office, for example, how it looks like, right? If they
Sure,
are
absolutely.
harmonized, if they work really happy together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of times, again, a lot of these founders, they've come up with whatever the solution is, and this is their baby, and that's what they're focused on. And, no disrespect to any founders out there, but a lot of times they miss some of the other core aspects of just business, right? And that's the advantage of having VC, because you also, in addition to money, you get experience. And so that experience is what they sometimes, I hate to say discount that because you're really in search of money, but experience is what helps, right? It's the experience that says, hey, listen, do these things, put in these little tweaks here and there, um, you know, plug these things into the company culture, watch the morale change, watch the results change.
Don't make mistakes that have been already done by
Right,
others.
exactly, right? The reason that some of us are in this space is because we've done these things, right? We've already learned the hard way. So there's no reason for, you to learn the hard way. We've already done that.
I do agree. Absolutely. Yeah, that's sometimes the problem with founders. They're very focused on the product, the service, and they mean
Absolutely.
all the big picture.
Absolutely. And I get it, because at the end of the day, look, what you got in, what is going to get you to the end is perfecting whatever that product or service is, right? But you can't be so focused on the destination that you miss the journey. And that journey is all the other stuff, right? It's the company culture, it's the etiquette of the company, the etiquette of the founders. It's all that other stuff that makes that company go from good to great.
Absolutely. I mean, it brings to my next question is how involved do you get with your portfolio? And this is a very this question is very close to me, and I asked to so many VC, how do you add value to the investments?
So again, I think the way you add value is absolutely connections and experience, right? One of my companies is a platform company, right? So when I made my I guess one of my most successful ventures in my career was a staffing firm, and the strength of that firm wasn't necessarily putting butts in seats, as they say. It was really the back office support that we brought to our clients. That back office support is the stuff that most business owners just don't want to deal with, right? Payroll, workers comp, benefits, things of that nature, you know, accounting, the payables and the receivables. It's all the back office stuff. When you have a founder who is, going a million miles a minute to get their company off the ground, the last thing they're thinking about, benefits. Last thing they're thinking about, recruiting, right? Like normally there's a founder, or there may be, a couple of founders, right? A founder and a co-founder. But whatever that solution is that they're working on, they've got it in their head. They know exactly how it's supposed to go, how they want to see it go. They have no idea about the accounts payables and receivables and, you know, who's covered by workers' comp, what the benefit package is. But those are all the questions that an employee coming into that organization is going to have to ask. They're going to want to know those answers. And that's how you attract and retain top talent, right? And at the end of the day, if you don't have top talent, I don't care how great your idea is, it's not going to go anywhere.
I do agree. I mean, team and talents are everything is so difficult, especially when you scale, to keep them in your team, because they just go and everyone calls them. So it's very complicated to build up a good team. It's such a complicated stuff to keep them.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and listen, there's a battle globally for top talent, right?
Exactly.
And so you have to be able to attract and retain top talent, right? And the way you do that is culture, benefits, perks, all those things. All that goes into attracting and retaining talent. But those are conversations that typically at the founder, co-founder level, they just don't have. Nobody says during their pitch, and this is how we're going to attract and retain top talent, right? Because that's not their concern. Their concern is, hey, listen, we've got this problem. Here's our solution to the problem. How much money can you give me to help me fix it? Yeah. That's it.
That's what we call smart money.
That's right. That's right.
Will you be leading an investment?
Leading investments. So typically we don't, right? Typically we follow on. Leading, I feel like, there's that saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? Nobody really wants to go first in the VC world, typically, right? But you do have, and I do believe there's a certain benefit from having certain firms that lead investments and then other firms follow on. Leading that investment is a lot trickier, right? Companies, other firms are depending on your level of diligence, and they're depending on you to say, hey, look, we absolutely did our homework on this from every angle possible, and this is what we think, and because of that, we're putting money in. Not saying that we don't want to do our own due diligence, but you do absolutely want to lean on firms and leverage firms that have larger staffs. They do a lot more diligence. They see a lot more deals. They digest them a lot faster. And when they make that decision to lead that investment, then following on, I feel like is a little bit safer.
I mean, leading is not that simple. And in my opinion, very industry focused VC should lead when you have it just doing this, nothing there. I mean, if the startup you have invested needs another round, they probably will because you're seed. Do you get involved in helping them to get the next money?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question for me?
In case your startup needs another round, early A, B,
yes.
You get involved to help them?
Maybe through referrals, right? We really try to stop at the seed round, and we want to see if we can shorten our horizon, that sort of thing. But if they're when they're getting ready to go into their A and B rounds, it's just through referrals. I've got a few connections in the PE space, and PEs, as you well know, PE firms are now getting a little bit more involved in the VC space. So there was a point where, if your company didn't have a certain valuation, PE firms just weren't that interested. Now that's changing a little bit. I think, the amount of capital in the market and just some other factors are forcing PE firms to look at the VC space and look at those firms that are, in their Series A rounds and that sort of thing with a little bit more seriousness than they have maybe in the past.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I do believe also the sides of the ticket change the dynamics.
That's right.
A round, B round, especially where you are in US, which is completely different from Europe, sites has much smaller valuation because valuation. But in US, valuation are pretty big. So for a private equity firm with 10, 20 million in ticket, it's pretty comfortable now to get into
right.
an A round.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as you well know, private equity normally would not have been seen until the B's and C's, right? But now, like I said, because of availability of capital and all kinds of things, and just pure out competitiveness, I think private equity firms are having to look at A rounds a lot more now.
I do believe also because they can really elevate their return. ROI can go very high with venture
Absolutely.
capital.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Private equity is slightly different. How do you expect your investments to help your portfolio? I mean, should your portfolio companies have some kind of interaction at some extent?
That's, I think, when appropriate, right? Typically, we're looking at tech or tech-enabled firms, and sometimes oftentimes they're solving different problems. So even though they're tech or tech-enabled, they're not necessarily sharing the same industry or the same space. However, I think when it's appropriate, you should absolutely introduce, portfolio company A to portfolio company B, right? There are a lot of companies that use AI now and that sort of thing to do analytics. And, quite frankly, there are a lot of companies that can benefit from that. So, I really like the AI space. I like companies that are doing that. I like the data analytics space. And to your point, when you have companies that you're invested in that have those types of solutions, those solutions tend to be universal. You can spread those to just about any company, and that solution is useful in just about any space.
Exactly, especially when it comes to technology.
Absolutely.
It-
Absolutely.
I mean, we always would like to have the next unicorn in our portfolio, but we know perfectly how many startups fail all the time.
Right.
What happens, Wesley, if your startup fail?
I try to, if anything, I'd like to think that we're going to fail forward, right? So maybe we didn't do a great job analyzing the problem for whatever reason, right? Maybe we didn't do a great job, analyzing the team, the people, for whatever reason, right? Sometimes, in life, things happen. Sometimes situations change. That's okay. That happens. But if we can take pieces of a company and say, okay, listen, we're going to roll this company into another company, or we're going to save ourselves in this way. I just don't think that anything that you put solid diligence into, through people, through the problem, through process, whatever it is, anything that you put solid diligence into, it's not going to be a complete waste. It just means that we're going to have to pivot and perhaps, do things in a different way, or use, maybe merge this company with another company and perhaps, save ourselves in that way. I'm always looking for the how can we save ourselves. Now if it's unpreventable, it's unpreventable. But oftentimes I feel like, a simple pivot and just a little bit more diligence in a different direction typically will get us a save.
You said, and I've been talking with a few investors already about M&A in venture capital and startups. Was not that trendy. It's coming quite trendy now. What's your point of view in M&A in startup?
Absolutely. So again, to your point, M&A wasn't that trendy in VC before, right? Now, you're talking M&A, you're talking leverage buyouts, and really what you're talking about are bolt-ons, right? You're talking about, hey, listen, I have this central company and it does this. And as a way for us to improve their earnings, improve the revenue, and improve, EBITDA, all that stuff, we're going to now take this company and bolt on, right? It makes natural sense because these two companies have a synergy. Let's put them under one umbrella and let's go grab a third company, put it under the same umbrella. Now we've got this behemoth that we're building, and now it's more attractive to private equity. So I think that the M&A, the leverage buyouts and all that kind of stuff really will attract private equity sooner, right? Because now the revenue is larger, right? Valuation is larger, presumably, right? EBITDA is larger, presumably, right? And now all of a sudden, private equity that may have ignored the smaller company, now that you've put three together and banded them together and really just, through arbitrage, right? Now it's like, okay, now we're ready to go. So now here comes private equity to take you out. Maybe that shortens your time horizon.
Yeah, I mean, consolidate. It's a big deal in private equity.
Sure.
That's personal. Why did you become an investor?
Oh, wow. I'm nervous to quote my next, to quote the next, to make the next statement, but it's absolutely true. I love the art of the deal, right? We all know that's Trump's statement, but I do. I love the art of the deal. And I think through becoming an investor, you really get to see the art of the deal, right? And that's just it. It's the art of the deal for me. I love assembling that puzzle, and I love being able to watch something that I've had a hand in putting together just flourish and grow. And so for me, it's just, it's fulfilling.
Do you enjoy?
I do. I absolutely do.
I do believe it's the most beautiful job. I mean, I'm biased anyway, but I do believe it's a lovely job. Venture capital, by far, to me, is the most beautiful sector where invest money, and it's
Absolutely.
so exciting. Yeah, so much going on. Which are the critical points that trigger your decision at the end to invest your money?
Typically, it's people first, right? I mean, I realize, we can talk problem all day long and, size and potential and all that kind of stuff, but it's people first. I need to know first and foremost that the people I'm talking to have the ability to solve this problem, right? And have a passion to solve the problem. Passion is, again, it's the one thing that nobody talks about, right? I've found that the VC space tends to be extremely opportunistic. So people have the solution. They're like, oh yeah, we can build a solution for that. And the next problem comes along, we'll build a solution for that too. There's no passion behind any of these solutions that they're building. And because of that, I just feel like, more than anything, I mean, what you can't diligence for is passion, right? You can diligence for the problem, the people, you can look at people's backgrounds, you can do all that stuff. It's the passion that you can't diligence for, but that's the intangible it factor on so many of these companies, is that these founders were so passionate about what it was that they were doing, they just would never give up.
I agree. Passion is king when it comes to startup.
Absolutely.
So because it's so easy to fail. If you're not passionate, you just give up. That's it.
That's right. That's right. Like I said before, if you've ever been an entrepreneur in your life, you already know that every day is not going to be sunshine, rainbows, and you're going to have some hard days, right? There are going to be some days where, listen, payroll's due on Friday and it's Thursday, and hey, listen, that invoice hadn't been paid yet, right? I mean, come on now, we've all been there, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, look, you're sitting over at your banker's desk going, listen, man, I don't know what we're going to do, but listen, I'm gonna need you to make something happen, right? Because I can't let these guys not get paid, right? I need everybody back at work on Monday. I mean, and that's just the seriousness of it, right? Like, don't put me on my soapbox, but I tell people all the time, there's a difference between, running a business and growing a company, right? That it is not the same. And when you start having departments and employees, and you got to make payroll and all those things, you're growing a company, right? I mean, nothing against YouTubers or anything like that, but you get enough views on YouTube and they send you a check, you're growing a business. That's not a company, right? And the two are just totally different. And when you start doing this, and like I said, when you start talking about payables, receivables, benefits, payroll, you're growing a company. And at that point, I mean, you better have some passion in there because it's going to be some rough days.
I do agree. I mean, to all this startup on mentoring, I always said to them, one thing is you are your co-founder and you can play whatever you want because you don't need to pay anyone. You one thing, you have 10, 20 employees. That's a different music.
Different deal. Different deal. When you have people depending on you to do your job, right? When you have people's mortgages and car note payments and daycare and children's, school bills and things, like, all of a sudden it's a different ball game. It's very real.
I agree. Absolutely agree. It's different. Even the stress.
That's right. The stress. Listen, you see all this gray hair? That's the stress.
Absolutely.
I've done it before. That's the stress. Done it before.
Let me ask you, what is when you talk to startup, the first thing that they do, they come to you and pitch. And these are, we get knowing startup founders. What is the perfect recipe for a great pitch, if there is some?
I always say the best pitch is no pitch at all, right? If it's a great idea, to me, it just makes sense, right? Now, sometimes you have to explain it, right? I've seen a couple of pitch decks here in the last couple of months where I was like, I'm not quite sure what we're talking about because I didn't understand the technology. But once I heard the buzzwords, but I didn't really understand the technology. Once you understand the technology, then you go, oh, okay, now give it to me all over again. Now that you've given me an education on what we're talking about, give it to me all over again and let me see if it makes sense to me, just as a lay person. And once things make sense as a lay person, right, then you say, okay, that makes sense. Now we've got the problem out the way. Now we're looking for, we know the people, we know the problem. How are we gonna make money? How does it make money? Does it make enough money? Is this a great idea that's gonna grow on to be some business? Or is this just a hobby that we're gonna put a couple of dollars behind? And so you start looking at it a different way, but you just, honestly, the best pitch is no pitch. Like, if I need some education behind it, so be it. Give me the education, and then tell me about the idea, right? And then at the end, say, oh, by the way, here's a deck on it if you want to see it, because I ought to be able to go through that pitch deck myself and make it make sense again, and say, okay, now that I've sat with it, I've read it a couple of times, this is great. I see why you are so passionate about it. And ultimately, that's where I should come out. If I come out of your pitch and I'm going, I don't get it, then it probably wasn't that great of a pitch.
How important is that team to attract venture capital investments, belonging to the startup, of course?
I think it's very important. Again, you just have to be able to understand what they're talking about. And I think, again, with that pitch, that's how you understand it. You just have to be able to digest it.
And will you invest in startup in technology when the IP, the intellectual property, does belong to them? For example, the main is done outside, not sourcing.
I don't think that's smart. I think if a startup doesn't own the IP, it's probably not the best idea, right? Because when you start diligencing for risk, that's a huge risk, right? That's a red flag to me. That says, hey, listen, if something changes tomorrow, then the way this startup was doing business would ultimately have to change. They're not in control of their own destiny if they don't own their own IP. So that to me is a red flag. I had that. In fact, I had a startup pitch an idea to me, and they didn't own the IP behind it. It was just a horrible. It's a huge no to me.
I mean, do you think it's possible to recognize a unicorn since day one?
I think it's possible to recognize something unique, absolutely. But again, if there's IP involved in it, I feel like they should own that IP. And if they don't own that IP, then in the event that something changes, when you start laying out substantial amounts of money, you need things to be relatively certain, right? And you need to control as many risk factors as you can as an investor. And if they don't own that IP, that to me is a huge risk factor that's beyond our control. And again, if something happens, we're dead in the water.
What's in your opinion the best sector to invest in 2022? And if you can, for example, suggest to founders a sector where they can get involved and starting their endeavor, where should be, in your opinion?
So I like tech and tech enabled companies. Now, that said, we all know there's all kinds of tech, right? There's agri-tech, there's biotech, there's insurtech, all kinds of tech companies, right? Personally, what I see happening, and this is a train that left the station some time ago, and I just don't see it slowing down, is the NFT and crypto space, right? Um, NFTs are here to stay. And I think that space is growing in popularity and functionality. I think developing on the blockchain is growing in popularity and functionality, right? And as those spaces begin to become more refined, and you've got the emergence of the metaverse and things like that, I think companies that are touching on those spaces um, in a positive way, those are the companies that are going to experience tremendous growth. I have no idea where the metaverse is going to end up. I don't think any of us do. What I do know is that there's been a lot of money put toward the metaverse. There's a lot of money that's going toward, Web 3.0. There's a lot of money that's going toward NFTs and blockchain development and those kinds of things. I think that's where technology is going. And I think founders who have realistic solutions to problems that they can solve in those general areas are going to be the companies that 5 years from now experience the biggest booms, and those are the companies that 5 years from now will have the best returns.
Wesley, thank you very much for coming to VC Talk. It's been a very pleasure for me having you.
Thank you for having me, Max. It's always a pleasure and really good to see you again.
Thank you so much. Take care.